This is the Detroit Sports Podcast Network.
The biggest icon in podcasting.
Thanks everybody for downloading this week's edition of Doc and Jock on the Detroit Sports Podcast Network. I am the Doc, John Macron, joining me here in the studio for a great post-NBA draft reaction show is my guy Adam, the Jock Strozinski. A real quality NBA draft for the Pistons, recapping what's going on with Troy Weaver and the moves that he's making, really establishing himself amongst the other GMs in Detroit. We got to react to a great ESPN documentary. E60 really highlighted something that has been near and dear to all our hearts here in Detroit. Red Wings fans, hockey fans, fans of the NHL. A great rivalry was revisited. Breaking that down because it was amazing. I was at LCA to see a sneak preview, and boy, was it worth it. And as everybody knows, if it's free, give me 33. I definitely took advantage of those free tickets and went down to LCA, had myself a pretzel and a hot dog, and watched an amazing 2-hour special. And then we'll finish. We have to just include a little bit of what's going on with the Detroit Tigers and Avila. I know that that's not the topic du jour per se. The man that is leading the Detroit Tigers is not amongst the most popular people in town. But we got to talk about it because the other three are making moves, and it definitely sticks out like a sore thumb when you see the moves of the others. And all of a sudden this week, we see Itzhak Paredes doing his thing and making Avila look like he got boned in a trade with Tampa Bay. But let's talk about something great. I believe you on Sunday at 1 o'clock had an opportunity, or at least DVR'd it, and have now, by the time we're recording this, have sat down and spent 2 hours watching Unrivaled because it was great. You saw the reviews that I posted on our Twitter page at Detroit Podcast. It's fabulous. It was all the way around a quality presentation that I felt in the world of hockey definitely for us in these parts was needed because of the memories that were created by the Red Wings and the Avalanche in that time. It was just a different time for the sport, but boy, did it unlock a lot of great memories that went down in the 90s as the Wings were coming up, as the Avalanche were settling into Colorado after the move from Quebec, and the way in which those two clubs started to move together was amazing. It was an A-plus documentary. Now, was it perfect? No, we'll talk about some of the things that could have been better, but boy, for what they focused on, it brought back a lot of great memories. That's why it was probably the highlight of my week, checking out that Unrivaled documentary at LCA on the big screen.
Yeah, I thought it was fantastic, and it was appointment viewing. I ended up watching it Sunday morning, like the rest of the common folk. We're not all privileged like you. No, you made time to go see it. You did send me the link to get there, but I couldn't go do it. I had a couple other things planned. But no, it was appointment viewing for the weekend, for Sunday afternoon. I made sure I was in front of my couch, and I didn't move from my couch for 2 hours. And initially going into it, I thought it was only going to be about an hour long. I was pleasantly surprised that it was 2 hours long. I thought that this was a series that you really could have built upon, and you could have did something like they did with the Michael Jordan series. I thought you could have did like a 10-part miniseries, giving us an hour each week if you really wanted to do that, because there's so much here, so much depth. But I thought what they did in the amount of 2 hours was they did a really good job of breaking everything down, making it concise, and giving it to you and presenting it in such a way that you really understood what took place and how important it was and how vicious that rivalry was. Because if you were around that time, if you're a new sports fan, if you're a new Detroit sports fan, I know a lot of times people are a little bit younger listening to this podcast, you weren't able to experience it live. You basically heard either your older brother talk about it, or maybe you heard your dad talk about it, or you heard somebody talk about it. You maybe went and downloaded a couple of videos, catched a couple of things on YouTube, but you weren't able to experience it. It was almost the fabric of Detroit Red Wing hockey at that time period. It was so monumental, so important, and I remember being so upset when Claude Lemieux ends up checking Draper and they move on. They win the series. They end up going and facing the Florida Panthers. I remember being so upset that he only got the 2 games. And I was just irate that was all that was all that got. But it was a different time. I mean, you heard Brian Burke talking on the presentation of it. Like, he sounded like he was a straight up caveman, but it was old time hockey. That's how hockey used to be played. Like, it was considered a shaving cut, he said, if you got 10 stitches or less. Like, it's not a big deal. You just keep it moving. I mean, it was a different era of hockey. It was a different time. And I think the thing that kind of came out of it, Colorado viewed Detroit as soft, viewed Detroit as too much finesse, not enough grit. And it was a team that, through losing and getting close and getting your shit pushed in, they got that grit. They got that determination. And hockey's a weird sport where you're just seeing it with the Colorado Avalanche. You have to get there, you have to lose. You have to get there and you have to lose and you have to figure it out, and you come back and you're better for it. It was one of those things where Detroit, for the longest time, they were the team of the 90s. They were a team of the decade. And they were a team that played so well. In 1995, they ended up getting swept by the New Jersey Devils. That year, I think that was the year that they ended up winning the 62 games. That might have been 96. I think it was 95. I'm not 100% sure. But that team was so damn good. You get to the finals, you then get swept by the Devils. The following year, if it wasn't that year, the following year, they end up winning 62 games, and they get ousted by Colorado in the semifinals. It was a team that kept getting close, but just couldn't figure it out, couldn't figure out what the winning piece was. And then it takes basically Draper getting his face mangled to kind of solidify this team and bring them back and make them a much more staunch competitor, and eventually pushes them over the edge. I thought it was really sad. I don't know about you. I'm an extremely emotional guy, especially when it comes to sports. I got really choked up when they started talking about the Vladimir Konstantinov angle with that whole story, because it's like it is days later. You basically lose arguably a guy who would have been one of the greatest defensemen to ever play the game. There was a scene where he's skating in and he just has hands. Like, you don't see guys who are like 200 and 265 pounds, 250 pounds skating in with force, much less a defenseman skating in with this type of force and having the hands to be able to deke a goalie out and just put the puck where he wants to put it. But Vladdy had that. It was absolutely bonkers. And then somebody even said it on the documentary. Vladimir Konstantinov was a better defenseman than Nick Lidstrom. Like, let that sink in. Nick Lidstrom is a Hall of Fame defenseman. Is arguably it is him and Bobby Orr at the top. You had another guy who everybody says was better. It's just absolutely crazy to me. I thought they did a fantastic job covering it from all angles.
It is, and really, the thing that many people highlighted was they should have maybe went all the way through the 2002 season and that series that they had when Patrick Waugh lifted up his glove, the Statue of Liberty. The Wings win that series, and then it propels them into the 2002 Stanley Cup, their fourth. But they really wanted to focus in on, which it's obvious in terms of drama, intrigue, the Claude Lemieux issue, the hit that he put on Chris Draper. And really, a scene that we're going to play here, just a quick recap. The trainer, John Wharton, comes out, and they do a good job of panning to his reaction. He looks like he's seen a ghost. And it's crazy because he's there, and he sees there. He's the first person to look in the face of Chris Draper to see an indented cheekbone. And you got to remember, Chris Draper is by the boards. Claude Lemieux comes up. And in hockey, there's a code. You're not supposed to check somebody where you can see the numbers. Yep. So that's kind of a sacred kind of thing. But in the realm of when you see the play, it's bingo bango. It's fast paced. So Claude Lemieux was known for it. He calls it finishing his check, but in the end, it was a violent hit. The one thing, though, I will say that was really fascinating to me was that gets overlooked was earlier. Kozlov checks Adam Foote, and it really said, Adam Foote says, if you guys want to pinpoint it on Claude Lemieux, Kozlov really started this shit when he checked Adam Foote, and he's bleeding all over the place. And it was really interesting to look at just from the Colorado lens, where it was like every time they did something, it was like, oh no, it's hockey, it's old school. And every time we did something, it was bloody murder. And it was the coach, Mark Crawford, that kind of highlighted it. It was really cool to see from that side. But Foot was like, what about me? Where's the love for me? And I'm sitting there bleeding all over the place.
So that play is very interesting because you can see Foot stalking Kozlov around the net. He was lining him up to hit him.
Yeah.
And in a split second, Kozlov turned. Like, this is how talented a lot of the Russian players were on this team.
Yeah.
On a split second, he turns and he does. He palms the back of his head and slams his head into the glass.
Oops. I was like, oh. But then... Does that
and no call.
Does that change a little bit? Maybe Claude Lemieux sticking up for his boy because he's also at the same time trying to stand up and be physical for the team that he's on.
The sucker punch that comes later on.
Yeah.
Okay, now we're even. Okay, now we're even, Steven. The hit on Chris Draper
lowbrow
is it is incredibly dangerous for a couple of reasons. One, like you said, right, there is an unwritten rule. If you see the numbers and like you see both numbers and you've got 100% view of the numbers, nothing is at an angle, you don't hit the guy. It's illegal. Okay, you just don't do it. Two, Chris Draper skating backwards away from the puck. The play is moving towards him. Head is down. He's in an awkward position because he's trying to get the puck and get it moved back into Colorado's zone. You then have Claude Lemieux come in from behind as Draper is in a completely vulnerable spot. He has no way to defend himself, has no idea the hit's even coming, and smashes his face into the side of the board. When you're ever around the benches, it's always a little bit dangerous. You don't ever... You finish your hit, but you don't take an excessive liberty, right? In this case, Claude Lemieux, and the play happened so fast. It happened so incredibly quick. Chris Draper's in an incredibly vulnerable position, and Claude Lemieux, I don't want to say uses excessive force, but he completely and utterly finishes the check on Chris Draper. In a situation like that, I don't want to say you pull up, but you don't go all the way through. There's always a little bit of reserve that you can have. In this case, Lemieux does not reserve anything.
And here's John Wharton, courtesy of Unrivaled. E60, it premiered. Listen to his description, and we're wrestling fans, and we drop a wrestling podcast every weekend on this Doc and Jock. We call it the Doc and Jock Wrestling Podcast on the network, and you'll understand by the description, if you're a fan of Seth Rollins, just how nasty this hit is.
Put your cheekbone, or right between your cheekbone and your upper teeth, go put that up against a hard 90-degree angle surface, be it a granite countertop or a wooden desk. And then imagine somebody curb stomping you from behind. And that's basically what happened to Chris Draper in that moment.
Yeah, so you want to do that? Hell no. Curb stomp. Basically, put your cheek against that table and have just me run up and jam my foot into the back of your head and see how that feels. 4-inch indentation. It was brutal. And all the photos that they showed and the rehab. I just think, too, look, Claude Lemieux, it was interesting because they did try to humanize him a little bit with Brendan Shanahan and having him show up with Darren McCarty at the anniversary. Everyone's saying that, hey, Claude is an interesting character. He's a guy that you really would want on your team. He's an enforcer. He is the Darren McCarty of the Avalanche. But I just think that the one thing he could have did, and yeah, on the ice, afterwards, you're celebrating, you're rah-rah, you're puffing your chest out. You could have just said sorry to the man. Just publicly, look, I'm very sorry. I never wanted to see a competitor. You already won the series.
Yeah.
All you have to do is say, I'm sorry. A day or two later, a week later, someone should have said that.
I find the Chris Draper Claude Lemieux relationship incredibly interesting because Chris Draper still incredibly bitter.
Yeah, you heard him.
Like at the very end, have you forgiven Chris? Have you forgiven Claude Lemieux? No. Do you want to even try to make amends with him? Do you want to try to even talk to him? No. I have no, like, he has zero time for this man in his life. And you think about it, right? If you've ever had a really bad bone break, right? You wake up in the morning when it's cold, that bone hurts. This guy has had to have numerous surgeries, multiple reconstructive surgeries on his face. This guy has to wake up every morning and his face has to ache, has to hurt. And in the wintertime, and you know how cold Michigan winters are, it has to hurt like hell. It has to it can't feel good. I thought that was riveting, right? Because you got that realness from Chris Draper. Like, Chris Draper didn't hold anything back. Chris Draper's like, no, I want nothing to do with this guy. And it's all about it. Like Scotty Bowman said it in the documentary, right? They found footage of it. All you had to do was say sorry.
That's it. So you just say
That's all
sorry.
you say sorry.
Sorry, that's it. And the best, though, I thought one of the highlights, too, was when Mark Crawford, they show him cussing out Scotty Bowman in the series, and he's like, we had to fill up all these beeps, beep, 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 and it was just really great. And, Mark Crawford lost his cool. It was funny because he went to his kid's school the next day, and people thought he was like a raving lunatic because of how that's the power of television. But I think if they can, yes, it was great that they had a scene in a night where McCarty and Lemieux hashed it out. The next one, if you can do it, if you can find a way, you got to have
Chris Draper,
and Claude Lemieux sitting across from each other and hashing it out, because you can get into some talks about hockey, hits, the impact. Why don't you say sorry? And really, because remember now, this is a great dynamic too. Claude Lemieux in his current life is an NHL agent, and he is the agent of Moritz Seider, the NHL Calder Trophy winner, Rookie of the Year. So that means Claude is on the phone with Steve Yzerman, on the phone with with Red Wings brass. That means there could be a sort of, there's been maybe talks of some kind of reconciliation, maybe at the very core level of like, could we do this? I think if someone can get them to sit down and have a conversation just about the brutal nature of hockey, that dynamic would be riveting. At the very least, you could have the movie and then just an hour talk afterwards, just talking about hits, what it did, the impact. Chris telling him face to face, "You did this to me." Yeah, there's a line in a rivalry. What you did might have crossed the line, and then Claude can defend himself and say, "Look, it's just you're full go. If you let up, you're like a wounded duck," and you can have kind of that psychological dynamic between. This is why the sport now is not as violent, but it's not as good because one of the highlights of being at LCA was Mickey Redmond kind of brought out the old school. He's like, everybody today loves each other. He's like, this is not the same NHL as it was. Everybody gets a ribbon. Everybody loves each other. But to see that
was one of my biggest takeaways.
Yes.
Is some of the stuff that was discussed, guys didn't get any penalties.
There were no penalties.
There were no penalties. There were no suspensions. Nowadays, guys are sitting 5, 6,
I don't know,
sometimes 10 games for some of the stuff that took place.
Did you notice the scene when Claude walks off the ice and you see the commissioner sitting there?
Gary Bettman's
a real hockey person.
Tool ass.
Yeah, a real hockey person is not sitting there with his finger over his mouth looking like someone shot his dog.
Yeah.
A real hockey person should have been applauding, standing up, being like, this is hockey, and riling it up, because at that point, it was justice served against, at that point, justice was done on the ice.
Yeah.
And it was established. There's the officials, there's the league, and then there's the players. So I think that scene was poignant because you can see the look on the commissioner's face. We're going to lose sponsors. This is going to be called violent. We're going to get kicked off the air. But this is the essence of the sport as it was. Did the change that they made grow the brand of hockey? Now, I think, like anything, it has to be refined. You don't want people bouncing each other's heads off. You don't want it to be like that. But fighting in the rivalry in the game there should be more hatred in the competitive nature. There should be much more hatred amongst, and maybe after this, it can be like that.
Let me ask you this: do you think that the way the cap structure is situated now, it doesn't really allow for that, because
the goons can't make money?
Well, you can't have the enforcers like you used to.
Yep.
That's one. Two, you can only keep so many good guys on your team, right?
Yeah.
Because you have the salary cap. Before, it was like baseball. You could spend as much as you wanted to, right?
Yeah.
There was no salary cap. Bring in whoever you want. If you have to, you pay a luxury tax. And it wasn't really like there was even anything to worry about then. It was the rich kept getting richer by bringing in really good talent. Like, there was a reason why those Detroit teams, you had 5, 6, 7, 8 Hall of Famers on lines, and then you had stars. Maybe not a superstar, but like after that, you had like 4 stars on your team, and then you had guys waiting in the wings like a Henrik Zetterberg, a Pavel Datsyuk, who later on became stars of the NHL. So it is I think a little bit more to do with the cap structure and guys not necessarily being willing to take a pay cut. You do also have to realize NHL players get paid the absolute least of any professional athlete. It is unreal. Like a good salary, like a high-end salary for like a guy like an Alex Ovechkin, right? 7, 8, maybe $9 million a year, where you're talking like teens and 20s and $30 million. Like baseball players are making $40 million a year. The like really good football players are making somewhere in the neighborhood of $20 to $30 million. You know, basketball players are incrementally more. It's unreal what I seen this morning. Russell Westbrook signing a player option for $47.5 million. In the NHL, you got a guy making $8-9 million. Like there is a huge disparity there. So when you look at players, like you've got prime example, right? Colorado Avalanche just won the Stanley Cup.
That is correct.
Kadri is about to become a free agent. Kadri was instrumental in this team winning the Stanley Cup. There's a good chance Kadri's not going to be on the Colorado Avalanche team because he's going to go hit free agency, and Colorado's not going to have the money to bring him back, and he's going to go sign someplace and make $7-8 million a season. You know, and this is a guy who was, like I said, he helped them get through multiple series, get to the Stanley Cup Finals. And then he had a big goal and won a game for them in incredible fashion. And this is a guy who is a bit of a glue guy, a guy who you can put on your second line and he can go out there and do a couple things for you. And they're not going to be able to bring him back because of the salary cap. And that makes it hard to have that hatred because guys move too much. You know what I'm saying? You look at those Red Wings teams, you had Steve Yzerman, you had Darren McCarty, you had Chris Draper, you had Kirk Maltby, you had Sergei Fedorov, you had Larionov. Like those guys stayed. Those guys hung around. Like a lot of those guys who were part of that 96 team were part of that 2002 team. Like if you go back and you look at it, like the majority of that core is still there. That doesn't happen anymore in sports. And I think it has a little bit to do with the salary cap. And that's why you don't have those nasty rivalries.
Yeah, it's crazy, man. It was crazy to see the way in which now some people have said this, and I want to get your sense before we move on to Troy Weaver and the Pistons.
Troy Weaver's a magician, by the way.
Magician. And you'll stay tuned because it was great to see what he did and his efforts to get the Pistons back on track. Because part of me felt the same way, too. You're like, man, we're looking back to the past, and this last really 6-year stretch of Detroit sports has been so bad. With right now, it's Rebuild City. We've been podcasting now since 2013, and after the 14 season with with the Detroit Tigers and their playoff run with Brad Ausmus and their futility, we've in essence have just been talking about rebuilds. We've been talking about draft picks, lottery picks, tanking, looking at Tankathon 1,000 million times.
Bro, I'm on it right now.
Oh, are you? Exactly.
I'm on it right now.
Good work.
So exactly. That's what I'm saying. That's what we do is to say who is what where. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. That's where we live. We're sports fans. It's
I
not
just
like
showed him my computer and I'm on it.
He's on it. Good. You're not on adult content. This is progress.
This is progress.
In moving toward your 40s, this is very progress. Very good progress. But
I got a site for you if you need one.
Okay. Off the air.
Yes.
So we'll definitely make sure to take a detour there. But it's just unfortunate that the Wings have been missing the postseason now for 6 years of this podcast, because we were talking about success. The 2002 team with all the Hall of Famers, all the talent that Ken Holland was able to assemble, the goaltenders, Osgood, Mike Vernon, and then you go in and you kind of start dipping with Curtis Joseph and the end of Hasek and stuff like that afterwards. It just stinks because for the better part of 80% of this podcast, the Wings have not been in the postseason. Yep. So that stinks when you look at it.
Not just the Wings, though. Like you
Others
look,
too, yeah.
Look at the Pistons. Lions have, I think, had one, maybe 2 seasons there where they were kind of relative. Like you didn't expect anything, but they were kind of relevant. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, they got to the postseason.
And then it was the Tigers early on in this podcast's history that really carried the good talk that we would have about playoffs. Nobody, since we've been doing this podcast, nobody has been a legit contender. Nobody has had a chance where they've gotten to the playoffs and we're like, oh yeah, this is the year. Or it feels like this is the team of destiny. Nobody.
One nice run with the Pistons in 14. So I think, No, wasn't that 14? The last time the Pistons won was 2014, wasn't it? Yeah, I believe so.
2004.
2004. It's been 17 years.
Yeah.
There's been a few. Are you serious?
Yeah, 2004.
I'm just like hallucinating here because of the fact that we haven't had a Pistons winner in such a long time. It's been almost 18 years. Since all. Good Lord.
If you guys could see his face right now, the reality of what he just said washed over him.
How did the Pistons win in 2004? Oh yeah, 2004. My brain wanted to tell me 2014. Bro, it's been 17.
It's been so long.
Years. Bro, I was 25.
Yeah.
I'm 43. Jesus, my mind wanted to say 2014. Yeah, it's been actually that long because then they had that decade from 2000 to 2010.
You had the Charlie V. Ben Gordon years.
It's been a wasted decade. Wasted decade, bro.
Yeah.
A wasted decade. Almost 1,000 podcasts we've done together. And nothing. It's just not right.
2014, I think you're thinking of the Lions. Lions had that one season where they had Ndamukong Suh, they had
the playoffs.
Matt Stafford, they had Calvin Johnson. They were a team that you were like, okay, they're going to get to the playoffs. They got to the playoffs.
The 14 Pistons won 29 games.
Yeah.
So it's like I said, your brain wants to think positive in an effort as much as humanly possible. 2004 was the last Pistons championship, and they got to the finals the next year. And 17 years of futility since. That's crazy, not having a title. And then this rebuild has been awful, going through the Stan Van Gundy years, Blake Griffin, and now this young rebuild. I guess, look, it's kind of a great segue. The Red Wings, looking at the past, maybe now with Sakic being the GM of Colorado, getting his cup, that and looking at Tampa Bay and the way they were constructed, having Steve Yzerman in charge definitely puts an onus on the current Red Wings group with Chris Draper in the front office and some of the members of the grind line can potentially take this to the future, so we don't have to always just spend time looking back. We can look to the future. And one particular executive looking to the future and who's going to put out an NBA team that's going to have an average age of about 23 is the Pistons and Troy Weaver. And going into it, I think for us, in the most part, we broadcasted last time just talking about, okay, trade Grant to Portland. When it happened, we were all like, okay, maybe you didn't get as... I could sit with the argument that you didn't get the proper value.
Hold on. Were you pissed off? Because I was pretty annoyed. I was super annoyed. I was like, what is he doing?
But I then understood that, Detroit fans can overvalue. I didn't think he was a person to wait a couple years for a first-round pick in a couple of seasons. I thought maybe you could get a top 15 pick, 15, 14, in that vein. I never believed you'd get a top 10. But then to see, everybody said, guys, it wasn't a secret. Guys, relax, let it percolate. Guys, sometimes it's up to the minute in sports. You have to live in the moment. In the moment, I was like, I wish he could have got more. But then everybody said, relax, let it percolate. Troy's going to do something. Everybody kind of knew. And then it happened, and people were starting to say, okay, it's probably going to be for the likes of Jalen Duren, that the organization just loved his workout, like absolutely loved it. And then you saw, and basically for the Pistons fans, it was, what were the Kings going to do? And luckily the reporting was accurate and fair that the Kings didn't want Jaden Ivey, and that Jaden Ivey didn't want to be there. He had a natural affinity for the Detroit situation because of his family ties, so he didn't send medicals. The idea was that there was no real connection there. And the Kings took Keegan Murray. And that was great. I think once that happened, LCA erupted for those fans that attended. It was just basically a great situation.
I was at a bar.
It was great.
Right?
Bar was happy, probably.
Yeah, everybody cheering. It was weird because not very often am I out for a draft. Usually when I'm watching a draft, I'm usually at home because I want to hear everything. I want to know everything that's going on. I usually have a computer open so I can do, different research. I can find different things. I've got my phone going. I'm usually following stuff on Twitter. So I was out after I had a hockey game that evening, went to the bar after with a couple of the guys, and the draft was on. And the moment that Keegan Murray was drafted by Sacramento, the entire bar erupted because you knew what was coming next. And for Jaden Ivey to be there, I think was absolutely fantastic. Again, we talked about this, I think, last week, and we talked about this in a couple of our shows building up to the NBA draft. There were 4 guys that were guys that you needed to target and guys that you had to try to get to. And the Detroit Pistons were drafting 5th. The Detroit Pistons were number 5, and you're like, crap, this sucks because those guys are going to be gone. But Sacramento went all Sacramento, did you a favor, And you came away with probably the most explosive athlete in this draft. You came away with the guy that you wanted, a guy who wants to be here. Again, this is 2 drafts in a year, or 2 drafts in a row that you've had Troy Weaver go out and grab guys who said that, no, I want to be a Detroit Piston. How hard is it to find guys who want to be Detroit Pistons? It doesn't happen. Unless you're winning championships, it doesn't happen. These guys want to be here. You got the guy that you targeted. Awesome. Kudos. Hats off to Troy Weaver by making that happen with the draft. And again, this is coming off of a night where we were both kind of like, well, what is he doing? Why is he trading Jeremy Grant? We want more. Get more back. And yeah, we do tend to overvalue, but you could see it was a complete salary dump, and you got a pick where it really hinged on whatever Milwaukee was going to possibly do. But to be able to then take that pick and spin that pick into gold, and we talked about it, right? You and I, we mentioned it. He loves to be active on trade night or on draft night, and was able to spin this into another top 15 guy, arguably the best big man in the draft. Absolutely fantastic. Like kudos to Troy Weaver showing the ability to get things done. How impressed were you with what he was able to do? Not just waiting and being able to grab Jaden Ivey, but being able to go back out there and grab Jalen Duren and be able to make this happen. Like he ended up trading away a draft pick that he was never going to use, picked up the dead body of Kemba Walker, and grabbed Jalen Duren.
It was great to see. Now, here's the thing, though, that's concerning. It's a young core. What was the biggest Pistons weakness that you saw in the last couple years? It was the shooting.
It's 3-point shooting,
specifically. Shooting. Exactly. Keegan Murray, if you look deeper inside the numbers, was maybe a slightly better and more reliable 3-point shooter than Jaden Ivey. But look, Troy Weaver loves his big men. So Jalen Duren is the big man that you can do some things with. The question mark remains, can the Pistons develop a reliable shooter? Because, yes, it's not believable that you can recreate Steph Curry. But that's the last thing we all saw was, hey, the Warriors were down to a team that was considered better than them, and Steph Curry just like, okay, no, money, and he's just shooting lights out. And even with a down Draymond Green, you still had 2 other shooters in Klay Thompson and other young talent on the Warriors. You look at the Pistons, you're going young, you're hoping for development, you're kind of going with a compliment to Cade Cunningham, but this is really going to be an interesting scenario because of the fact that Benedict goes right after Jaden Ivey.
Yes.
And that's the pick where you go, you might be a little concerned about that player because you need shooters. You need guys that can create their own shots and don't need the ball. Now, Jaden Ivey has a lot of skills, but you got to remember, too, that he's young and raw, that he's not going to come in and just be like the next Kevin Durant, that you got to take your time with it and hope that the shooting can come around because it was really bad. But I think the complementary style, the toughness, I think at least you see Troy Weaver with a vision. And that's all you can ask for is get young talent and the ones that they're assembling with the likes of Sadiq Bey, with Beef Stew, with Jaden Ivey and Duren, along with Cade Cunningham. It's really going to be really incumbent upon that number 1 pick that they had, Cade Cunningham, that if he develops into that reliable guy, the facilitator, the guy that can be clutch when you need him, if that can be the case in 5 years from now, here's the thing, though. Can the Pistons fans wait 3 more years for all this? Because remember, they're going to hit their prime together, between 25 and 28. So you're looking at the 2024 to 27 seasons being the ones you got to rely upon. But right now, you can in no way knock what Troy Weaver did. He gets an A+ across the board.
It's unreal.
Nothing, but you have to. What I'm looking for is I need my Klay Thompson, and I need a guy that I can say, boom, Cade Cunningham can boom fake a pass to Ivy, kick it out to the guy, and I know that he's going to be reliable and handle his business.
Yeah, you need to find that shooter. You need to find that deep threat. You need to find that guy who you can feed the ball to, and he's going to knock it down. Pistons don't have that guy yet. I don't know if that comes in free agency. I don't know if that guy comes next year with the draft. I'm not sure what your expectations are for this Detroit Piston team going into next season. I expect them to be better than what they were this year, but to me, this is still a very incomplete product. For me, this is still a team that is a little bit in flux, a team that is still missing a couple of guys that are going to play and going to contribute. I think it's going to be really interesting to see what happens. I believe NBA free agency starts on Friday. I think it'll be interesting to kind of see what takes place with the Pistons in free agency. The thought process is Kemba Walker is going to be bought out, so that'll help free up a little bit more cap space. This team has a ton of cap space now. This team has the ability to go out and sign guys, but who wants to come to Detroit? This is a really weird free agency class. I don't think there's a guy out there where you're like, oh my God, I must have him. I have to have him. That guy's going to put my team over the top. So this is going to, again, rely on Troy Weaver to be savvy, go out, sign a guy, bring him in, and hope that you can get the most out of him and really be able to cultivate that culture of winning. Because I think that's the one thing this team is lacking right now is that culture of winning. And you're right, they need shooters, and shooters help you win games. You've seen it with the NBA playoffs. You've seen it with the NBA Finals. Steph Curry could take over a game. That team could be down by 14, 15, 16, 17 points, and in a matter of moments, he cuts it to single digits, and Golden State's right back in the driver's seat with the momentum swing. So you do need a shooter. You need somebody out there on the wing who can knock down big shots. They don't have that guy yet. I think that comes maybe in free agency this year. If not, they get it next year. But for me, this timetable, this is what it looks like. It looks like this team should be competing this year. Next year, this team should be either in a play-in game or this team should be in the playoffs. So all of a sudden, things have kind of expedited, and I'm expecting more, a lot more, from this team than what we got last year.
Ooh, how many wins?
I'm going to say, I'll say 36. I'm between 35 and 37. I'm going to say 36 wins for this team.
I think in the 30s, 30 to 33. I think a little bit of an increase. Young team, still got a ways to go, but moving away from the bottom dweller. Kind of, your goal is to kind of just be in the conversation for the play-in situation.
Absolutely.
Young team. What do you think this says about the team's commitment to build around Cade Cunningham? I mean, I think it's a good fit.
Oh, absolutely. This is the thing. I think this backcourt is going to be incredibly explosive. Mm-hmm. I think this backcourt is going to have the ability to take over games. A lot of dribble drive, a lot of penetration. You're going to be working in big men for pick and roll action. It's just you need to find somebody where you can kick the ball out to them and you can count on them hitting that big three. You can count on them when they're open because the pocket's going to collapse. Everybody's going to sag around either Cade or Jaden. They've got to be able to get that ball out to somebody who can put up a big shot and make it. This is, what's his nuts? He was a Michigan player. Went to
Jordan Poole?
No, went to Miami.
Duncan Robinson.
Yes, Duncan Robinson. If the Pistons could somehow, and I don't know what the cap numbers look like, but somehow trade for a guy like that, because Duncan Robinson was a guy who his rookie year set the world on fire, and then this past year was basically the seventh man on that bench. A little bit weird. If you could somehow get Duncan Robinson, again, I don't know what the cap situation is. I'd have to look at that. This is just off the top of my head. You get a guy like that, or you get that guy, there's your guy who you can post up on the wing and you can feed the ball to when you're trying to penetrate and everybody's sagging and collapsing around you, because he's money from beyond the three. You don't have a guy like that. They need that type of player. I think this team's a little bit more complete after that.
Yeah, it's a good job. I think at least you give Dwayne Casey a little bit more talent to work with to develop. But I'm curious now, because the next topic becomes, and I think because of the pick of Jalen Duren, which was, I thought, cute as well, because the Knicks really wanted Jaden Ivey, and they were just trying their best, and you saw all the angst from the Knicks fans. I thought that the Duren pick...
I think the Knicks probably had the worst night.
Yeah, they did.
Just clearing up cap space and just
Terrible.
You have a whole bunch of possible first-round picks.
Terrible. I think that the Duren pick kind of precludes them from giving a max contract to DeAndre Ayton. But
which I like. I don't want Ayton.
We said that too because of what happened. You don't want to bring a guy that you question his heart ever into a locker room of young players. But I'm curious your thoughts, because I'm biased, so I can't really speak on it. I'd love it. Miles Bridges.
That's my dude.
Charlotte is not doing the deal and is not going to give him max situation. You do it?
That's my guy.
Why is he your guy?
I feel like he, one, He's a little bit older, right? This is another guy who's explosive. This is a guy who I think each year he's been in the league, he's gotten better. I think you can bring him in and he gives you a little bit more with that pick and pop, gives you a little bit more that he can help stretch the floor, doesn't necessarily have to play with his back to the basket, can face up, can shoot. I think that is the guy that you can go out, grab, and he makes this team offensively that much better. And DeAndre Ayton was a guy who I just didn't like what he brought. Here's the thing. The position of center has really evolved, right? When Andre Drummond was a Piston, right? We talked about it, right? He was basically a prehistoric player. He was a guy who just didn't fit what the new NBA looked like. I feel like DeAndre Ayton is kind of a guy who is between what you want the NBA to be and what Andre Drummond was. He's like that tweener in between. That's why I don't want him. Miles Bridges, I think, is just a more athletic, explosive guy who has more tools at his disposal. And I think it makes this offense that much more elite, that this offense that much more explosive and able to put points on the board, especially when things are tough. When you're going up against a good defensive team, you can sometimes find a seam. You can kind of create a little bit. He has that ability to not necessarily take a game over, but he has that ability to score big buckets when you need them. And that's why I would love for them to bring him in.
Okay. Is that the only big contract you would get? Anybody else that's on the radar potentially? I know a lot of people like the Dallas player. You know, everybody likes the big name free agent, but I think the Pistons are going to be conservative and maybe not splash so much this year, but maybe next year.
I think that's kind of where they're going with it as well. I think you're going to go bring a guy in this year, maybe one. You might bring in another guy on a short term.
Brunson's the name that everybody's like, oh, Raven over. You know, I think everybody's just having just a conniption about what he can do and the talent that he brings. Jalen Brunson of the Mavericks, 25 years old, going to be 27 this year when the season begins. He was second-round pick in 2018. And they just think that right now the Knicks are, I think the reason why they cleared all their space was to make a push for Jalen Brunson.
Yeah, that would make sense. Mm-hmm. But I think as far as the Pistons go, it's going to be a more measured, conservative approach.
That's how you got to look at it.
And I think it is the following year is maybe when they kind of push all their chips in. And it's like, okay, cool. Now we've got our team. Let's go. I think we're still stacking a couple of pieces.
Okay. And as a result now, after everyone has seen the work that Iserman's done, the work that Brad Holmes and Troy Weaver have done with their recent drafts, people are like, wait a minute now. Detroit is starting to put together, as a sports city, a collection of general managers that know what they're doing. They have a clue. They have a plan. They have a vision. There's aggression. Brad Holmes, aggressive. Troy Weaver, aggressive. Steve Yzerman, aggressive. Making moves, moving on from talent. That Anthony Manta trade might go down as an underrated trade if Verona stays healthy and is a solid contributor. The bold selection of Moritz Seider could be considered a steal for where he was projected to be selected. And then you look at Avila, and the track record, unfortunately, if you're Avila and everybody's, who's wise and speculating looks at it and goes, oh boy, Avila has probably done the worst job among the four. And it's by a wide margin, by a lot. I mean, right now he's getting raked over the coals because Itzhak Paredes is just bombing the baseball, and he was AL Player of the Week. I mean, the last thing Tiger supporters needed to see was Itzhak Paredes not hitting 1, 2, 3 homers in the same game. That's just rubbing it in the face. You know what they should do? They should just stop broadcasting games with announcers and just let them play. Like they're gonna do. Like they're gonna do on which is crazy, but I might peek into it for the novelty of that craziness. Let's just not. The most common joke from that was, can you just play the game without the Tigers roster? And that's the way it is because morale is bad and the team is in a funk, and you don't see any light at the end of the tunnel with the Tigers.
You really don't. And I think it's incredibly frustrating when you watch what Troy Weaver was able to do at this year's NBA draft. And there's a ton of hope for what he's going to do in free agency. I find it weird that Steve Yzerman still hasn't named a coach, But what that tells me is there's a guy that he wants. There is specifically one person that he wants to bring in, and he's waiting for whatever reason. I'm just going to put this out there. It might be John Cooper. I don't know. We'll see what happens. But there's obviously a reason, because all these other head coaches are signing deals and are going places. And all of a sudden, the coaching pool has dried up for the Red Wings. So Steve Yzerman has a plan. And you could see part of his plan. I mean, Mo Seider just won Rookie of the Year. Like, that's a big deal. You haven't seen something like that from the Tigers. You know, you can look at the Lions, and I think there's always renewed hope for the Detroit Lions, right? But it really feels like you have a general manager who knows what the hell he's doing. You know, you've seen some of that with some of the picks that they got last year. It really seems like he has a concept, there's a laid out, well-structured plan, and things are kind of going accordingly. The one thing that the Lions are probably missing is the quarterback. And I think a lot will be told this year by what you get from Jared Goff. But again, you have a general manager who has a plan. You look at the Detroit Tigers, it really feels like there is zero plan. It is like everything is done by a whim, and there's nothing that is accounted for. There's no measures that are taken. It is just kind of, let's just kind of go in and we'll see what happens. Cool. You keep drafting first, second, third overall in the MLB draft. That's great. Much like the NHL draft, these players take years to come back up and to really contribute. Spencer Torkelson probably shouldn't be playing this year. He should be a guy who probably was brought up middle of the season and got a little bit of experience that way. Instead, he started your season, and that was more because you needed to start him. I think if you grabbed AJ Hinch, you had a real conversation with him, and everything was off record, he'd probably tell you he'd like him to have started in the minors this year and then brought him up. I think what you have here is you have a general manager who is way in over his head, has no idea what he's doing, has regularly been raped when it comes to the trade deadline, giving up pieces, giving up guys, giving up quality players and getting nothing back in return, and then trying to spin that like, oh, we got guys, we got this, we have that. Do we really, though? If you look at the guys who are really contributing to this team, they are hopes and prayers. Like Spencer Torkelson was a guy that you took a flyer on. Bo Brisky, another guy that you took a flyer on. You know, cool, Riley Green is up and he's contributing. That's fantastic, but you would have been an idiot if you didn't draft him, right? It's the same thing with Spencer Torkelson. You don't get credit for those guys. You get credit for guys later on in the draft. And he hasn't been able to produce any of those guys. This is a team that hasn't been able to produce a positional player since before I had gray hair in my beard. And I've had gray hair now in my beard for at least 10, 12 years. It's unreal. So at some point, Chris Ilitch has to make a move here. Otherwise, this is never going to get righted. And I'm going to say this, and I'm going to say this to you now, and I want this to be marked down. Put this on a calendar somewhere. I think the only way Avila gets replaced is when AJ Hinch says, I'm out, says, I'm done, ends up leaving. Like he's got the option to leave this year. Like if things don't work out, AJ Hinch has the ability to go. I think that is the only way Chris Ilitch is forced to do something, because then what you do is now you've kicked the can down the road again, another year. So that means Avila goes out, hires another manager. And when that is horrible and blows up, because you have to realize you have a top 5 manager in the game, those just don't fall off of trees, he's going to leave. He's going to go someplace that has a better situation, because what you're giving him is nowhere near good enough. And you're going to trust this man to have another major league draft. You're going to trust this man to have another round at trading when the trade deadline comes around. Things are going to get much, much worse for this Detroit Tigers team. And I think at that point, AJ Hinch leaves. Avila hires another coach. Things implode. And at that point, Chris Ilitch has to make a move.
Wow.
If you ask me, Ilitch needs to make a move right now, but he won't until he's absolutely forced.
Yeah, it's tough because the confidence right now is at an all-time low. I think people have formulated their concrete opinion. This thing is a bust. And when that happens, you lose the supporters. And when you lose the supporters before the 4th of July, that's pretty bad. You know, you have still 80 or so games. You're almost at the halfway point, and you're 14 to 16 games under 500. Your pitching now has kind of come back to the pack a little bit. It's nice. Javi Baez is hitting. I mean, it's not a total wash. He actually is making some plays. Riley Green got to, number one top Sports Center play with his amazing catch. Torkelson, though, unfortunately, has not lived up to the billing, should be sent down. And you recognize that you're probably not going to get what we all expected for Austin Meadows. I mean, Austin Meadows, the expectation was that he's going to come in and maybe find something. But why do we think that when the Tigers have shown that they don't find anybody?
They don't find nobody.
It's like, you look at it like Trace Thompson's now hitting since he's gone. Itzhak Paredes is now hitting. Nick Castellanos is playing well. There's something going on with the development of the players on the roster, and it's not about the talent. It's maybe about the coaching and the development.
At what point do you say the Paredes trade was a complete and utter bust? Is it now? Is it a little bit too early? Or does Paredes have to go and hit 20, 25 home runs for you to be like, yeah, he totally got screwed on this trade?
I still need to see what Meadows can do the rest of the year, because obviously Paredes is gone.
Any concern, though, with Meadows? I mean, he deals with vertigo, so it's a bit of an issue.
There's a concern because there's an expectation you're trying to resurrect a guy, and the Tigers haven't shown that they can do it. So I'm concerned about the, Casey Mize, Faedo, he's not a flamethrower anymore. It goes back to the fact you maybe didn't get enough for Michael Fulmer, and it starts, there's just a series of, and here's the thing that sucks, okay? And I think that obviously we're considered local media. And when we say things, oh, they're just blowhards, oh, they're just being negative, oh, they're just being this. And then you open up a national post from Ken Rosenthal, and he just is like basically sitting there, when you have that propane tank and it's just getting hot and you turn it up and it's like, he turned that shit up hot. And he said, in his column for The Athletic, he said, here's why the Tigers have sucked. It is a massive miscalculation on a lot of levels in terms of development, draft, and the line that really caught everybody was league executives don't really have confidence that Avila is going to turn this around.
No, I don't think you should. But I was going to say, does it feel like, so you have this article comes out by a well-respected writer.
And people all gravitate toward that.
Exactly. Does it feel like the seat is hot for Avila, though? Like, I don't even feel like he got warm.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like it's just, okay, business as usual. And I think that is the biggest problem. I think that's the one thing. If you're a Detroit Tiger fan, right? I think it's the one thing that probably makes you the most upset is you have journalists going out there and they're telling you why this is failing. They're pointing out hardcore facts and giving you reasons that are explained. And they're doing it in massive publications. And it doesn't even feel like the temperature's gotten slightly warm for Avila. It feels like for him, it's a nice, cool, calm summer's day. Nothing to worry about here. It's just business as usual. Whereas any other owner who gives a shit about his product, it really feels like it would get ratcheted up from at least being on a 5 to now possibly being on a 7. For Avila, it just seems like we're cooking at a 2. At some point, it might get warm. We don't really know, though. And I think that's the biggest issue. I think if you are a Detroit Tiger fan, that's the one thing that should probably piss you off the most if it doesn't already.
Yeah, it's bad in that it just gives off the vibe that he doesn't care.
Yeah.
Where's the passion? Where's the why does it take an extra year or two to conclude that this isn't going to work? I think we're there. I mean, a national media member looks at your situation and details the fact that you've missed on so many situations, your organizational depth, your international talent is not where it needs to be. You have a bloated players who
we're supposed to have a Dominican program. Where's that? What's going on with that? Like, who's come out of that? Nobody's come out of that.
Nothing. It's just a horrible situation that it stinks because it doesn't make it fun to watch baseball.
And what sucks is the same guy who owns the Red Wings owns the Tigers, and you can see that there's a plan with this team. And it really feels like there's zero plan with the Tigers. How do you give a general manager who's been this bad regularly, has just completely missed, whether it's with trades, whether it's with drafting, whether it's with going and signing free agents, regularly misses. And it is the articles that you pointed out chronicle it. And you've got a guy like Steve Yzerman who seems to have a pulse on everything that is good and what is going on with his team. How can you have two organizations that are ran so completely different and ran so poorly? Shouldn't the expectation be the exact same? What that tells me, like you said, is he just doesn't care. He doesn't care about the Tigers. The Tigers are a plaything for him. It's just there. I can write some money off with taxes. I've got a revenue stream coming in from the MLB television contract, from the collective bargaining and the shared merchandise agreements that we have. It's just another revenue source for me. I can spend the minimum and we can get away with whatever. That's what pisses me off.
Yeah, and that's what it is that it went south quickly, another slow start for the Tigers. But I think the good thing that maybe has come out of it is it seems like that the opt-out situation might not appear to be where it is. So I'm hoping that potentially AJ Hinch is in it for the long haul. It seems like he is, but maybe some other opportunities may come. I'm hoping that the Tigers avoid the complete collapse like you're talking about. So I'm hoping that's the case. I'm hoping that, they turn it around and they won the series against the Arizona Diamondbacks. They turn it around moving forward, because it stinks to see the lack of hope, the disdain, the anger that has permeated the Tigers organization and the supporters, because it's fun to watch baseball. People, make their livelihood making videos, and it's just all, this is a low point. This is the new low point. This is, unfortunately, maybe the rebuild can begin when Miguel Cabrera's contract is off the books. It's like an albatross just kind of choking the life out of the organization.
But
that's a start, because that's $30 million you can allocate towards talent. But you need
for sure. But you also
person to pick the people, and nobody has confidence.
There you go. You have to be able to recognize the talent. You've got to be able to go out and get them to want to come here.
Yep.
Does anybody really want to come here to play? I mean, I really feel like you had to kind of overpay for Javi Baez, and that's been a bit of a mess. At some point, he's not going to hit in the hundreds for the entire season, so it will get corrected. But at the same point, I don't think he's going to help you win baseball games. I don't think he's going to provide you enough to help get you over the hump. This was supposed to be a year where you took steps forward, and it really feels like we took a couple steps back.
And then to end, via Bally Sports, the Hornets. Because you love Miles Bridges and he's a Spartan, here's what Mitch Kupchak had to say on Miles Bridges.
I will say, as an organization, we love Miles. Okay, and we're going to bring him back. He's been great for the franchise, and I believe with his work ethic, he's only going to get better.
So pay up, Mitch. You got to pay up. We'll see what happens. That sounds like GM speak. Doesn't sound like potential. I don't know. Miles Bridges, I like his game. A lot of his shots are mid-range. I know power forward people like. I know that. I want my shooter. I want my Steph Curry. I want the guy that just fingers, boom, perfect shooting touch. I know it's going in. Perfect execution of the basketball shot. Someone that can create his own shot and handle business. Those power guys is great. It's sexy, but I need the workhorse. I need the guy that can shoot, put the biscuit in the basket, and let's see who develops from the Pistons as we move forward. Man, that was a good recording. That was good stuff.
Real quick on Miles Bridges.
Yep.
A lot of reports are that he's not being offered the max.
Yep. Yeah, I don't think it's worth it.
And I would agree. He's restricted? Is he restricted? So like if the Hornets, I'm looking right now, and just for some reason my computer is running incredibly slow. If he is offered a contract by the Hornets, the Pistons can come out and they have to basically beat it by like $1, right? Is that how that would have to work?
He signed a 4-year, $16 million contract, including $16.3 guaranteed, annual average salary of $4 million back. He has a contract for this year. Yeah. He's a restricted free agent.
He's a restricted free agent.
Yep.
Okay.
RFA.
Okay. All right.
2022 RFA.
So that means that the Hornets would have first rights to him.
Yep.
They can make him a contract offer.
Yes.
If he turns it down, there has to be a contract offer that is, I think it's like a percentage over. Yep. It can't be $1. I was just throwing $1 out there. It has to be like a percentage over.
So that's how it goes. Just because we have a shopping list does not mean it's going to take place. And we'll see. Building it slowly. Building through the draft. That has been the moniker for the Wings, Pistons, Lions, and Tigers. And unfortunately, when that time comes, you have to invest wisely when you do open the checkbook. And Avila has not done the best job of opening that checkbook in a way that has produced a winning situation.
But you are not a Jedi yet.
not anywhere near Jedi status in any capacity, Avila. And that's all we can say in this episode of Doc and Jock is the future's bright potentially at this time as we head into 2022, 2023, the second half. So let's see what happens with the others. But Avila, probably the lowest approval rating of everybody in Detroit. For the Jock, Adam Strozinski, make sure you follow him on Twitter at AdamRSTROZ. Follow the network if you agreed or disagreed with anything that we've said today. Message us at Detroit Podcast. Subscribe, like, share. Anywhere you listen to your favorite podcast, you just type in Detroit Sports Podcast, and our daily content will find you. Thank you so much for spending the last 60 minutes with us, wherever you may be listening. Thank you guys so much. Can't wait for next week as we break down the holiday, the 4th of July. What's happening? Can't wait to break it all down on the next edition of Doc and Jock.